Hey, Adam, do you need me to get a Zoom going for a screen share?
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that. Have we been doing that, or is that some giant kid? Those guys come through with it.
I got it going today, and your voice is still garbled.
Damn it. All right, I'll get off the AirPods. I think I need to dedicate a little troubleshooting time to that.
GM, everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Give Josh a minute to get the Zoom going, which you should see in stage chat.
Yeah, GK actually just posted it, and GK, I can't post in the chat. Others might not be able
me either. Do not have permission to send messages in this channel. Oh, ask and you shall receive.
I thought that might happen.
Thank you, Jankin, and thank you much for getting that Zoom going. Cool. So the Zoom is up. You can find that in stage chat. Welcome, everyone. These are our bi-weekly, for the most part, demos, 2 a month, I believe. It's our opportunity, everyone's opportunity, really, to show off things that we have in progress, things that are on the horizon. And we also like to keep this completely open for any technical discussions. And maybe you know about new libraries, new technologies, have suggestions, things that we should be looking at that would help us on our mission. We're always completely open to any type of technical presentation or discussion here. Also, as always, mishaps are expected. Demos are in progress work. If everything was perfect, we wouldn't need the demo because people could just go use stuff on their own. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Josh, who's going to get us started with an update on the engineering workstream budget.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm just going to take this first couple minutes to talk about the proposal that was submitted in August that passed, said that there would be a review of the budget of the spending in the workstream in the mid-cycle, which was just now at this beginning of January. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, whoops, I need to go to Zoom to share my screen, not Discord. I'm going to share my screen here. Make sure I've got that. Yeah, this one. Okay. So, this should be pretty quick. I got some details, but just at a high level, spending to date, we've spent $188,000. Our projected, if you include the spending that's to come in the next couple months, we should not be more than $502,000. And in the initial proposal, the amount requested was $714,600. So you might ask, why is there such a big disparity there? Mostly it's because fewer centralized employees moved into the workstream than projected. The people, centralized engineers in August, I was checking in with people regularly, and a lot said, yes, I'm planning to continue with the DAO. Come October 31st is when most of us hit our last day as a centralized employee, and most said, yes, I'm planning to continue to be in the DAO on November 1st. And then really in those last 2 weeks in October, I think 3 wind up saying that they were not going to. So that's the biggest reason. And salary is the biggest part of the budget. So that's the biggest reason. And then the other piece was that after doing some review, the total salary paid out during this period is actually going to be for 3.5 months, not 4. And that's because we're paying in arrears. So the November pay was not for the full month of November. It was only for the first 2 weeks of November. It came on November 15th. So any questions about this? I'll be posting this via the forum as well, just so it's documented and for historical purposes, and you can ask questions then too. But any questions now? All right, and then one more thing I wanted to review was there was a separate proposal for 200,000 Fox for bounties. That was before the proposal for the budget for the workstream. This was just so we could get some funds for bounties more quickly. So this is just a list of all the transactions on that address. And so we've spent less than 50,000 of that Fox, and that's how much is remaining. And then also there have been some times where before we had any other means, I traded Fox for ETH to be able to pay for gas. And so that address started with 200,000 Fox essentially, and it's not all been sent there, but now has 150,390 Fox and about half an ETH. And so you can see all these bounty payouts, and then there was this one where Ocean was taking over the bounty process, and so from this address, he requested 10,000 Fox and some ETH for gas, and so he's made 8 payouts and still has over 7,500 remaining of that 10,000. Any questions about this?
No
Cool.
questions, but what's stellar transparency?
Yeah, right. I guess that's what you get when you're working on ETH addresses and payrolls happening through Colony.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you coming up and sharing that with us. Next up, I've got DeFi Cafe. Is he in here? There he is. Get up here, DeFi. He's going to talk about some state management, state management refactoring that he's been tackling in web to set us up for long-term success.
Sounds good. So I'll give the context while I install Zoom. This is fun. So basically we started, when we started this open source project, we have a different kind of front-end strategy because previously legacy ShapeShift had GraphQL as a backend. And that meant that we use like Apollo client on the front end, which is like allows you to fetch data from GraphQL, and Apollo client like manages all of the like caching and like normalization of data, things like that. When we moved to like the new open source stuff, we had a different situation where we're like doing RESTful APIs, just dealing with Unchained directly, and that means that you have to deal with like a data fetching strategy as well. and data fetching and caching is something that's like kind of overlooked on the front end to do performant and well, like things like cache and validation, things like that. So another part of it was state management as well. So because we were previously using Apollo client, we weren't really using Redux in the app, and we just kind of started putting things into Redux without too much thought about how to do it. And it turns out once you've got a decent amount of data that you want to kind of join up and query, you do need to kind of give it some thought of like how you're going to do this. So let me see, is this going to work? 2 seconds, guys. New computer problems.
It makes things fun for about a year to get all set up again.
I know. All right, Zoom is relaunching. Let's see if we can share a screen. There we go. Cool. All right, so the first thing that we did was tackle the state shape in Redux. So as usual, kind of like read the docs, and people that had blazed this path before us had come up with a really good way of doing this. Essentially, you can think of this as like a NoSQL database in a sense, trying to kind of emulate a SQL database. By that, I mean trying to keep all the data flat. So for example, posts or comments on a regular blog, we can refer to these as like assets or market data. So now that we have unique IDs for a lot of things throughout our stack, so we've got unique IDs for assets, for transactions, for accounts, we're able to index these. So these are just like the IDs of like an asset. And then you have, so for each thing, for example, assets, we have a list of IDs, and then we have an object called ByID, which if anyone's done like CompSci 101, it lets you do like an O1 lookup. Like if you know the ID, you don't have to go and search through this object or the array. You can just key into it and get the data that you want. So the first thing I did was kind of started refactoring our store all across the place to support this this shape basically. And the easiest way to look at it is to just like see it with the Redux DevTools. These sometimes take a second to load. But it basically means that if we look at our state shape now, is this size okay for everyone, by the way? So now we've got all of these things, like I mentioned, we've got assets by IDs. So, pardon me, I definitely don't have COVID. These are our, what we call Cape 19 IDs. So these are unique asset IDs across chain, network, contract type, contract address. So this will work for, works for ETH itself, it works for Ethereum tokens, it works for Bitcoin, it extends to Cosmos as well. So this is our way of uniquely identifying an asset. And you can see in here, we have all of the asset data loaded. So, here's Ethereum, mainnet, where to go and look it up, details about it, things like that. So you can see the whole store here, basically for our transactions, it's the same thing. We have the IDs of the transactions and then the actual transaction data, the market data, again, keyed by like asset ID. So it means now we have this data normalized. It makes things a whole lot easier to get the data back out of the store, because you can essentially treat things like a join. So instead of using hooks everywhere throughout the app, and this was another problem that we were having, with Apollo Client, it allowed you to use hooks easily because it managed the data fetching and caching. You could sort of request data, and then Apollo would transparently do that for you. And if you already had the data, it wouldn't hit the network again, things like that. Whereas we were doing that with HTTP APIs and making way too many network requests. So we now use, once we've like fetched all this data and got it in the store, instead of using hooks throughout all of our components, we use selectors. So for example, this is the assets slice, and this is all of the code that we need to deal with all of our assets. So, this is the state that we showed it in. This is the reducer, which literally just like does an upsert when we get the data. And then this is the Redux toolkit thing that allows us to go and fetch it. So we reach out to the asset service once, and then we basically just change the shape as it comes back from the asset service. And then we stick it into our normalized store, and then it allows us to get stuff back out of here. So like if we wanted to, for example, given a token, I want to know the fee asset. So I can simply pass it an individual ID, and then it knows how to go and look up the, it can figure out what the fee asset is from that and look that up efficiently. So these kind of look like, in a way, they look like SQL queries do, joining data from multiple sources. The cool thing about these selectors as well is that they compose. So you can see here, like this select assets query is a selector here. Select market data IDs I'm bringing in from another file. But when you get to like more complicated stuff like the portfolio slice, things that we were doing previously that it was a fairly complicated thing to do, like select portfolio asset balances sorted by fiat. We have a selector that we can pose up, select portfolio fiat balances, which isn't too bad in and of itself. You get the assets, you get the market data, you get the portfolio balances, and you basically do a reduction over that. And then we can like simply take the data inside that and then sort it. So once you've got the data in this kind of like normalized state, it makes things a whole lot easier to query and work with. I think anyone that's worked with like denormalized data before, there are certainly places for it in terms of efficiency and caching and things. Like if you've got some really heavy computation, you might want to like store the output of that. But in the most cases, working with normalized data is a lot more simple and performant. And so what this also meant was, now that we've kind of got all of this data fetching logic in one place, so like the way we've structured this is, there's the asset slice of the store, which is concerned with the asset data, similarly market data, transaction data, and then portfolio. Preferences are going to go away, but basically each one of these slices of the store deals with its own data fetching. So the only thing the portfolio does is calls our backend Unchained for the get accounts query and kind of massages the data when it comes back and sticks into the store. So now that we've got all of like this data fetching and like normalization and querying kind of in a sane way, we can, a problem we were having before with like performance and loading states was we were making these requests in lots of places, and we're getting back loading states when the data was actually loaded, but we were like refetching it. So I wrapped the whole app in this like portfolio provider. And so what this basically does is, before your wallet is even connected, we know that we're going to need all of the asset data for the application. Like, it doesn't work without assets. You can't look at anything even without a wallet connected. So the first thing we do is go and load all of the assets that we use. And so they appear in the store very quickly. The next thing we do is, well, most people hold popular coins, so we go and grab the top 1,000 assets market data in one query immediately. So we've now got the asset and the market data loaded. The next thing we do is call this thing like use account specifiers. This is basically getting like the equivalent of the public keys from your wallet that you're going to, like, that as soon as your wallet's connected, it exposes, and we use these account specifiers to query Unchained. And then as soon as we have the like wallet connected, basically, for each of the like accounts, we just go and get the account data from Unchained. And then once we've got the account data from Unchained, we can say, hey, we've got all of these assets in your portfolio. Let's just go and fetch the latest market data for each one of these. So instead of all of the views across the app having this like logic for fetching and refetching data kind of littered everywhere, we just have this one kind of centralized, I realize the irony of trying to decentralize things, but some things are better centralized, and like data fetching definitely is. So, within kind of 40 lines here. We've like condensed down a lot of the data fetching logic that we had spread across the place, kind of making unnecessary requests or like duplicate requests, giving back loading states that were invalid when we actually had the data already. And then in the case that like, you know that you want updated data, for example, like when the price chart loads, we know that we're going to want to get the latest stuff. We can just make a little hook called like use fetch price histories. And then this simply just goes to the market API that we need and says, for all of the asset IDs we give it, just go and fetch a new price history. And that's all it has to do. It just says, go fetch it. And then the rest of the like data fetching stuff in the market slice is able to go and do that. So that will kick off, find price history. So it'll go and reach out to our market service and, select the correct market service provider. When we get the data back, it'll put it in the store. And then as soon as a component that needs that data uses it, we'll select the price history here, and the data will come in automatically. So like as soon as the new data is available, it'll just re-render super quick. So that's pretty much what I was working on just prior to the holiday break. It puts us in like, it's a lot more performant as well if you've used the app with any kind of decent sized portfolio and kind of refresh it. I'll close the dev tools to give a better representation of like what it's like now. But we pick from one of our saved wallets. So before I actually connect the wallet, you can see here in the store, we've gone and fetched the asset and market data. And as soon as we click connect on the wallet, you'll see here that we go out and fetch the account. And as soon as the account's ready from the back end, so there's portfolio, there's fetching our data for ETH and then 3 types of Bitcoin. And then here's these requests being fulfilled. And we already had this data ready for the components. So it just makes things a lot quicker across the board because all of the data is kind of cached and ready to go. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to show. Any questions from anyone?
That's awesome, DeFi. Super appreciate going through that, and can't be overstated how important it is to have these things ironed out and clean, especially to scale horizontally, bring engineers in and be efficient about making modifications going forward.
Yeah,
it's really easy to run off and get the first iteration working however you can, which is fine in a lot of cases. But when you're planning long-term maintenance and development of what's going to be a large and complicated app, it's super critical to get it right from the beginning and maintain that.
Yeah, the only user-facing stuff that you'll feel is like, it'll be more performant, but it also unlocks the work that we're doing this week on the account pages as well, which will support, unlock support for multiple like account numbers for Ethereum, or fixes our kind of Bitcoin problem and gets rid of this like account selector here, and we'll just show Bitcoin as multiple types of accounts. So getting this stuff was kind of essential in a sense. Mills had 2 questions. How long does a MacBook take to arrive? 6 weeks if you order them custom, which I did. And then another 4 if you're stuck out of the country while at Moxie sitting at home. And how do we like using Cape after a little while? It's been great. The Cape 10, which is the most recent one, we've implemented the account IDs. I'm not sure they've kind of thought about that enough, specifically around like Bitcoin, but for all of the other chains, it's worked really well. So like the Cape 19 for assets, the Cape 2 for like blockchain specifier, and Cape 10 for accounts. Like Cape 19, so given an asset, you can figure out what chain that you're on. And given a chain, you can figure out what the like fee asset is, like ETH. Just having like a unique identifier that can be used throughout the stack, and Kevin's now adopted it in the back end as well. So like the transactions now say like what asset ID that they're using. So yeah, it's worked out really well. I mean, it doesn't matter what standard we adopted, but having just a globally unique thing has been great. It's proliferated as well, like the market service stuff that we've done. I can show that really, really quickly to answer that question. So Theobald and Ryan did some great work on adding multiple market data services. So we have CoinGecko, CoinCap, and Yearn data now. So for each of these like providers, we have these adapters. So this allows us to turn our internal IDs into IDs for each of these sources. So it's pretty straightforward. It's a one-to-one map of our ID to, in this case, what CoinGecko calls Ethereum or what CoinGecko calls Binance Coin. So these have been done for each of the providers that we use. So, you know, here's our cape, and Yearn just uses the contract address. It means that we get to keep that abstraction right at the boundary. You know, they plug straight into the market service with one line. It's worked really well.
Awesome. Any questions? Anyone from the audience? Get your hand up. We're happy to bring you up here. We'd love to hear from you. Questions or comments or. Cool. Thank you much for that.
GM,
DeFi.
everyone. Yeah,
Great
no
work. Keep it up, man. Love seeing it. Oh, we got a hand up here. Don't go anywhere, DeFi. So we've got, if Osa had a hand up, click the invite sent. There we go. Welcome.
Good evening.
Hey, there you go. We can hear you.
Hey, can you hear me? Sorry,
How
I
are you
can't
doing
hear.
today? Do you have a,
Just
do
hold
you
on
have
a
a
minute.
question?
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no problem. Go ahead with a question or comment. Glad to have you up here.
Okay. I'm actually new on this.
Cutting in and out on us a little. Push to talk, maybe.
So maybe you want to type your question in the stage chat. Maybe that might be easier.
Yeah, or if you've got issues there, we can. So we'll cut over to Ocean, who's got some exciting stuff on SFox to share with us. If you're able to work that out, go ahead, get your hand up. We'll bring you back up. Cool. False alarm DeFi, and I'll pass it off to Ocean.
All right. DeFi, I think you're still screen sharing. Let me see if I can commandeer that from you. There you go. All right, so I just want to start with an overview of what SFox is and the intention behind what we're trying to accomplish. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay and see my screen. Let me know in the stage chat if that's not the case. Awesome. So SFox is this right now kind of this idea that's being proposed to allow Fox holders to deposit Fox into a smart contract that would allow them to earn rebasing rewards in the form of SFox that could be redeemable one-to-one in the future for Fox. So the cool idea here is that basically you would see the balance of your SFox growing meaning that you're getting rewards as time goes on through a variety of potential mechanisms that could be generating yield for you on your Fox. And over the break, we were working on speccing out some of the initial ideas behind this, and I kind of did a little proof of concept that showed some of the code that could make this work. And luckily, there's some pretty good contracts out there that already exist from protocols like Ampleforth and Olympus that have these rebasing tokens that we can borrow a lot of the code from. So the general flow can be seen in this diagram, which is really super basic. But if you hold Fox, you can deposit Fox into the staking contract, and you'd receive back at that exact moment the same balance of SFox. So you deposit 100 Fox, you get 100 SFox back. That Fox staking contract facilitate taking that Fox and depositing it into strategies. For example, this one is showing us using the tokamak reactor. And that Fox would go there, become staked, eventually earn rewards in the form of toke, and that would be deposited back into the staking contract. And in this model, one of the things that the DAO wants to be able to do is to take that toke and basically have the decision on what to do with it. So the DAO could hold that toke and basically reward stakers with more Fox from the treasury as a way of diversification. It could certainly decide to sell that toke and buy Fox on the open market and distribute that Fox to the stakers. It kind of gives us some cool optionality there. And this is just one small example where in the future we may have many yield-bearing strategies for Fox that could be used in a similar fashion. And it's not limited to that. If the DAO treasury is making profit and would just determines to distribute that profit through governance votes to token holders, stakers in the Fox contract could that could be a mechanism as well. So this TBD strategy could simply be that the DAO treasury is distributing Fox by using the profits to buy Fox on the open market and giving that back to the stakers. So really wish it was FoxX. There's been a couple names proposed. One was Foxy, which is pretty cool too, but don't take the name as gospel. We can change it. So that's the general idea of what we are trying to accomplish. And there is a prominent community member that is probably going to be posting a bounty for a lot of this work in the coming days to try to incentivize developers to basically take this kind of very early proof of concept and get it to a place where it can be launched for us all to use. So let me talk, switch sharing different screen real quick here. Are you guys able to see the Visual Studio Code now? I hope.
Yep. Sorry, it took me a minute to find them.
No problem. So this is the code that was originally forked from Olympus, and the reason that we took the code from Olympus is was just to basically make use of their the rebasing mechanism that they actually forked from Ampleforth, which is this great thing about all this open source code and projects out there is that we have the ability to kind of just use these things as building blocks and pick up where one project has left off, iterate on it, and the pace of which kind of the development is occurring is pretty cool. So it took their ERC20 contract and basically adopted it for our uses. And this ERC20 differs from the kind of the standard ERC20 in the fact that it rebases. And what that means is that without a transfer occurring, you'll see the balances in your wallet increase over time. This particular contract is meant to rebase only up. Some rebasing tokens could theoretically rebase down too, so they could be inflationary or deflationary. This SFox is, you can view it as an inflationary token, although it's still backed one-to-one with Fox. And the way that that's done within the smart contract is that there is like an underlying balance, and then there's like a factor that's used to basically scale that balance as rebases occur. So this, I don't even know how to pronounce this, gone balances. I'm not sure how they, what the math term they're actually using is, but is what keeps track of the underlying balances. So this is a mapping of your Ethereum address to this gone balances that you would occur. And then this gons per fragment is what increases as rebases occur. So that's what scales your balance as more Fox is deposited into the Fox staking contract, and the balance of SFox that you hold increases. So it's a little different than the typical ERC20, which would not have this kind of scaling factor that's applied as rebases occur. I'll show a couple other examples of that real quick, which is just the, so if you wanted to find out, for example, your balance of the typical ERC20, you would call this balance of function. And what happens here is that they look at that mapping of the balances, and then it's actually divided by this gons per fragment, which would give you your current balance. So a typical ERC20 would probably be much more like just this part, where there's just a balance mapping, and there's no factor that's being applied to it at all. A couple other differences here is that just the circulating supply obviously can increase as those rebases occur. So that same process goes on. And so when a rebase happens, which is this call here, which if you notice can only be called by the staking contract, which I'll talk about next. But this rebase basically distributes some amount of profit to all holders of the token. So for this case, it would be people that hold SFox. This would be called the some amount of profit, some amount of Fox that needs to be distributed, and this code would take care of that. And so then you can see that this total supply is increasing by the amount that we're rebasing. So it's not a fixed supply token, which is different than a lot of the tokens that people are typically used to dealing with. All right, so I think I'll take a few minutes to talk about the staking itself, or yeah, let's do that. So this is just a really bare bones implementation of the staking contract, and a user through a really nice UI that I'm sure will provide can call stake, and this would allow them to deposit some amount of Fox into this contract. When this happens, we need a way to allow for a couple of things to take place. The first of which is, if you can imagine that we are maybe we're rebasing every 2 weeks, for example. We would need a way to make sure that people that aren't simply depositing minutes before that rebase occurs, basically realizing the amount of rebase and then selling immediately on the open market, kind of front running our rebase occurring. As the rebase periods become longer and potentially bigger, this becomes more and more of a problem. And so the way that some of the other projects have dealt with this is this idea of like this warm up period. And so this is what happens here is that when you call stake, we transfer the Fox tokens from the caller to this contract for whatever the amount was, and a claim is created. And this claim basically says that, hey, once some time period has elapsed, you have this claim to some amount of SFox. And instead of the SFox going directly to the user, once this happens, it goes into this warm-up contract. And the accrual of SFox, or the rebasing, still occurs with that claim. So you don't lose out on any rewards. It's just a matter of making sure that you're not able to simply withdraw it immediately and then go on the open market and dump it. So it's if people were to do that, it's basically unfair for other stakers who are long-term stakers of the contract. At any time in the future, a user can call claim to basically, once that warm-up period has expired, they can get the SFox directly into their wallets. And if they wanted to not wait for that to occur and just get their Fox back because they need liquidity, they can call this forfeit function, which would allow that to occur. And so then if that was the case, they would not get any additional Fox, but they would get back their initial deposit. So it's kind of like an immediate liquidity provision. And then the last thing is if you run staking, the opposite happens, which is we transfer SFox from your wallet and give you back a 1-to-1 amount of Fox. And so that's fine. And the cool thing here is the rebase function. So there's a couple different ways we can trigger the rebases to occur. They can be done when people stake or unstake. And we can also create a little bot that could call the rebase function. Anyone can call this. There's no reason that it has to be any sort of privileged account. So it would be very easy for us to set up a way of doing this in an automated fashion. It checks that basically it's been enough time has elapsed since the last rebase, and then it looks at whatever this distribute amount is to call our SFox contract, which is, if you remember back to this, the rebase function here. Excuse me. And what it does, it sets up, it's the way that Olympus is set up, and we can of course change this, is that it's kind of like a T+1 settlement, meaning that the profit from the current period is distributed in the next period. So what it does is it looks at how much is the balance of Fox that's in this contract and how much is staked, how much SFox is staked. And then it determines the difference, because that's basically what needs to be distributed to the stakers in the next rebase that occurs. And it then sets this distribute amount, and that's what is determined as the profit in the rebase function in SFox. So this is just, kind of a pretty basic example, but there are some tests that kind of show how this works. Let's see here. So this test specifically has us creating two stakers that stake into the contract. So staker 1's depositing staker amount 1, and staker 2 staking amount 2. They deposit into the staking contract. They claim their SFox. You can see those balances move. And then we can kind of go through the rebasing flow. So the first kind of check here is that if a rebase occurs and there's no change in balance, like meaning that there's no additional Fox deposit into the contract, we wouldn't want to see any change in SFox, because that would mean that there's basically Fox being created out of thin air. And so this test here kind of checks that that's true. We can then add rewards to the Fox staking contract, meaning like the DAO treasury would basically be here depositing Fox into that staking contract by calling this add rewards for stakers, and this reward amount is then transferred in. And this test basically just kind of fast forwards through the period, the epoch, or the rebase period, by just kind of iterating through the blocks. And then we can see that once that does occur, and we call rebase, that everyone ends up with all the SFox stakers have additional SFox in their balances that's proportional to the amount that they've staked. So I think for this one, staker 1 had 1,000 or 10,000, and staker 2 had 1,000, right? And so they get the proportional amount of additional SFox based on their staking balance. So this is all in the repo, and people pull it down and check it out and run it. It uses it uses Hardhat as a way of creating an Ethereum local test environment for all this to run in. It deploys the contracts and then runs through the little test suite that's been created, and kind of makes sure that all the balances are being work as intended. So yeah, just a really basic proof of concept of how Fox rewards can be distributed to a rebasing token in the contract.
That is awesome. Stoked, and that's definitely the most detail I've seen the rebasing stuff explained in. So I'm learning and appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty interesting mechanism, I think, for creating a token. It's a little different than a lot of the standard stuff that's out there. So I like it for sure, and it was fun to dig into Olympus's contracts more too. I have looked at them a fair bit, but never enough to the point where I was actually kind of forking their code and then re-architecting it for a different implementation.
Yep. Hey, I'm curious on like the back end of it. You were showing on the diagram in the beginning, like using Tokamak and then earning there and using that to fund rewarding stakers. Is that a manual process? Is that something that would go through governance to manage what's happening with the staked funds, or how does that work?
So the idea right now would be that there's two different potential mechanisms for how the Fox would actually end up in the reactor. So and it depends again how gas optimized we want to make it. So one option is that when people call the stake function, it immediately basically passes through to the tokamak reactor and calls their stake function, which let's see, which I think is in their staking.sol. Anyways, it doesn't. Yeah, I think there's a deposit. They call it deposit function. But so that's one option, right? Where every single deposit basically would go through and then directly deposit the Fox into Tokamak. That's not the most gas efficient way to do it, obviously, because if you can imagine that we have these cycles with Tokamak that I think are a week long currently. Really, we could batch it every week where we save the gas of many users and then only call it once a week to get the total balance of Fox into the reactor. So we can go down that path and kind of allow ourselves some flexibility in the smart contract implementation by, when we call stake, we can basically pass a Boolean flag that would allow us to trigger that full cycle. And that could be the V1. And then very shortly after, we could have, again, our own little bot that would allow us to do it on a weekly basis because it's not a function that would need to be privileged in any way. So the security risks are pretty minimal. So I think that would be kind of the path I think that we would go. And then we could do something similar for the withdrawal because there is this time delay with the tokamak reactors.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Well, what about adding like some other future thing that's then like new contract migration path in order to change that?
New contract path and to change like additional strategies, how we
like instead of Tokamak or in addition to Tokamak, we want it to leverage some other mechanism to earn.
Yep. There's a couple possible paths for that. One is we could certainly just migrate the staking contract to a V2 and give users a really, one transaction way of doing that, which I think is, a lot of projects have opted for. The other alternative, which has its own risks, but is potentially a better user experience, is making the contracts upgradable. And then that would allow us to, upgrade the contracts without having to migrate anyone. There's a lot of debate on whether contracts are beneficial, but there's mechanisms that could allow us to do that. So I think that's kind of an implementation detail that needs to be determined, with the upcoming bounty on how we want to upgrade the contracts in the future.
Gotcha. Upgradable is typically like a proxy pattern or something to that effect.
Exactly. Yep.
Hey, John.
Hey, I just had a question on what you just asked. Ocean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's nothing that would stop the implementation that you've been working on, or the idea, the architecture from any, basically the treasury could deposit any amount of revenue from any source and it would work, right? Or does it only work from token?
So no, the answer is that you could deposit any revenue from anywhere. So like going back to this Fox staking, this add rewards for stakers, anyone could call this, which maybe someone wants to be really nice to stakers. And all it does is it takes Fox from whoever called it and passes it into this contract, and then the rebase can occur. So it's very generic on where the rewards come from, or even what address they come from. So we could potentially automate this from another smart contract in the future as well. There's lots of potential ways to integrate with just this basic interface.
Yeah, so then to your point, Adam, like the DAO could, like one of the things we were talking about even in tokenomics yesterday, to anyone that listened to that call, was that, the DAO could, for example, in addition to the tokenomics, the toke revenue, it could say, like, X percentage of revenue every month is going to be distributed to SFox stakers. And if that happened, then the DAO could simply just add that in. It could basically just distribute Fox to the contract, and it would go to the SFox. It wouldn't require any sort of contract upgrade, at least for a simple thing like that. However, it's getting its revenue.
Yep, that's correct. I think the question is more about like if we were trying to divert half of this Fox into a different, different strategy. That I think the upgrade stuff has to be thought through a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I just think it's important to point that out, that the DAO, the treasury itself has that optionality to basically earn revenue however it wants, and then distribute that to SFox stakers without any sort of contract upgrade. So that in and of itself allows for a lot of flexibility.
For sure. And the other cool thing too is if you are, if you were just thinking about this as the tokamak reactor and, well, I could just do this myself. It's like, yeah, but there's basically compounding rewards that occur through this process as well, which is really cool. So it's without you spending any gas as a staker, you're going to end up with a higher APY than you would otherwise, because every cycle basically this toke's going to come out of this, and there's going to be more Fox that you're controlling inside of the tokamak reactor. So pretty sweet.
So I have a question about this too, and this has been super helpful. That call, anyone can reward. I got that. So we can reward, the DAO can vote to reward SFox holders in any number of ways just by calling that function. But the Fox that's deposited, how it is invested, that would require a contract change, a smart contract change, correct?
Yep, that's correct. As it is implemented today, that's 100% correct.
Is there like a possibility of the Fox that's deposited gets put into some kind of multi-sig address that then there's a committee that then invests it or whatever, and then just calls that contract? So the only thing that's happening is the contract just does the Fox and the rebase and the SFox creation, minting, and then the rebasing? Or is that leave too much for manual intervention, and it might not be trustworthy in that case? Do you know what I mean? Did that question make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense, because with the current design, there already is essentially some need for manual intervention, sorry, from the DAO treasury and the DAO multi-sig. And the current implementation, right, this toke that goes into here, we're basically allowing the DAO multi-sig the right, or they're the ones that decide on this exchange occurring. How they want to take this token, turn it into Fox, or they want to keep the token, whatever that is. So the answer, I think, is yes. It's just how frequently we want to have manual intervention there, and I think there's multiple ways that we could handle it, and one of the considerations that I know the bounty hunter or the bounty creator is very much looking for is speed to market. And so I think that this gives us the easiest way to get kind of a V1 out the door without multiple complications. I mean, we could certainly make this even more generic where the tokamak reactor is one strategy, right? And we could have a mapping or an array of strategies with weights that are provided for Fox to be distributed. So, that would probably be a more generic implementation that allowed for multiple options. But I think it potentially is a really great improvement for V2.
Got it. Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right.
So as far as
any more
rebasing,
questions?
and anyone being able to do that, so the only reason that wouldn't be constant is the mining fees that go with the rebasing call.
The rebasing currently, again, this is just how Olympus has it set up, and Ampleforth as well, has a periodicity set to it. So if you look at the rebase, there's this end block of the rebase that has to expire, right? And so then they're incremented by the length every time a rebase occurs. So
you can't do it every block, even if you have a billion ETH that don't exist.
yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons why we may want that functionality, right? If we allow anyone to call this rebase function, which I think is really nice in terms of not having to rely on a privileged contract to do so, we want to make sure that rewards don't get distributed on a different schedule than we're expecting, because I think it again can open up like kind of griefing attacks or places that's unfair to longer term stakers where people are calling rebases in a ways that aren't expected. So I think there's again some questions on the length that we would set here and some of those things, but I think that having a set period will help users to know when to expect also that their balance should increase too.
Gotcha. Cool. This is awesome. You've definitely made me more bullish on SFox.
Love it. If that didn't make you bullish, I'll give you one little last piece of alpha that has been discussed, and then I can leave it there. But there's, as it stands right now, many DAOs that have tokamak reactors. I'm not sure how many, maybe tens, but in the future there'll probably be even more. And it's very possible that they would all be interested in some sort of staking mechanism that leverages their tokamak reactors in the way that we're talking about here. So, if this is successful, it potentially paves a path for us to, create a service that would allow other DAOs to use, a staking contract just like this, in the same way that maybe Olympus bonds are being used across different DAOs. We could provide this service to many DAOs, and it would be a really interesting way of being able to potentially earn revenues, diversify our treasury. There's a pretty cool long-term vision here as well.
Totally. Awesome. Any questions for Ocean from the audience? Raise your hand. We'll bring you up here. There's no silly questions. Yeah. So in that case, Efosa, you were attempting to ask a question, I believe, to DeFi. If you think you've got your audio situation straightened out, go ahead and raise your hand again. We'll bring you up here. I also saw Mills had hopped on the stage just as Ocean was getting started. So if you're still here, Mills, feel free to raise your hand again and we'll get you up here.
Mills said he had to run to a call, unfortunately.
Oh, bummer. Okay. Well, while we wait see if Osa wants to get back up here. I'll just take the opportunity to put out that we are currently hiring for the engineering work stream. So if you're technically minded and interested in the stuff you saw today or have seen in the past or the DAO in general, we'd love to have you jump in and join us, start working through that. I believe Josh posted a link in the stage chat to a couple of the opportunities that we're looking to fill. So join us. It's a great place to be. Hey, Josh.
Yeah, I'm just about to post again in the announcements channel where things don't get erased and cleared out and there's not too much chatter there. So you can always come to the announcements channel for the link to the job board, which will show you the open positions. And then in each job description is a link to the application. It's a super quick Google form application that gets the process started off. And yeah, we're super excited to bring in some new, fresh folks into the work stream. So if that's not you, then maybe you know someone that you could refer over.
Cool. Great place to be. Lots of freedom, cutting edge stuff, working on the frontier, fast paced. Everyone's contributions count and ideas count, and we're super big on kind of camaraderie and helping each other. It's been really refreshing for me. People that work in IT can probably universally testify that that's not always the case. But we've done I think a really solid job of bringing in top talent that's happy to check egos at the door and really rally around and help each other. We're all on the same team. So love to have new faces. So I guess DeFi, I see you jumped up here. Did you have something to add, or that was prep in case we got it?
Yeah, just preempting that question. That never happened.
Cool. Well, if you can hear us, you're free to ask at any time. Engineering public channel, we keep a good eye on, so can hit us up there at any point. Unless you post it in stage chat, which I haven't seen. But that wraps us up for this installment of engineering demos. Thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.